1, 2, 3, 4. When I was young, I had a lot to say. So I learned how to sing, I learned how to play. You said you were mine when you heard my song. After all these years, you still sing along. The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things we'll never forget.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Belcher, and I'm the Executive Director at FestivALL Charleston, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to this evening's Three Things. We are on Season 5, Episode 3, and our second virtual episode of the season, and just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to you, our viewers, and our guests for being so willing to make this pivot with us as we continue to host Three Things online. I'd like to thank our sponsors for helping to make this season possible. West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Farmer Cline and Campbell, the University of Charleston, MVB Bank, Taylor Books, and the Charleston CVB. A special thank you also to our season ticket holders and to local artist Ian Bodie, who creates the caricatures that you see of our three guests, not just for this evening, but he's been on board the Three Things team since the very beginning. So a special thank you to him as well. Jeff's got a special announcement at the end of this episode that he'd like to make, but I also want to add a little plug in for FestivALL Fall. October 10th through the 17th. I hope that you will all tune in and enjoy as the season becomes a work of art and we continue to share in the feeling of FestivALL year round. But in the meantime, we'll be sure to keep you entertained with some great episodes of Three Things. I'd like to bring to the virtual stage next is the creator and producer of Three Things, Mr. Jeff Shirley. So with that, Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you everyone at FestivALL. We're really happy that Three Things is part of the FestivALL team and that they allow us to do the show throughout the year. We're very excited to bring you episode 3 of season 5 of Three Things, my first, my favorite, my future, where we hope to just get a little insight from creatives and professionals and people that aren't creative or professional, a little insight into how they got started in their career, what they love about it, and what they would like to do with it in the future. It's a pretty simple concept. The guests will just come out and everyone will approach the task a little bit differently. I don't like to give anyone too much instruction so that we get these different approaches to the task. And a good example of that is in our first guest, Tijah Bumgarner, who's a filmmaker, and you'll actually see a little bit of that in her video. She came to me, I've known her for a while, but over the last couple months I had sat down to binge watch a show she was making called Quarantine Life, some short videos, and about 6 episodes in, I was immediately in love with the project and was looking into getting her contact information to get her on Three Things. We were about halfway through all of the episodes, and she really did a great job here for us. So tell us about her firsts, favorite, and futures. Please welcome Miss Tijah Bumgarner.
Well, Jeff, thank you for the introduction. Ow! Well, first, I would like to... Jeff, thank you so much for that introduction. Assuming it was good, because I don't know, I'm recording this in my dining room.
My name is Tijah Bumgarner. I am from Meadowbridge, West Virginia. I'm 16 years old, and I am a huge Hanson fan.
How did I get here? Where's here? Hi, y'all. I would say my first experiences with either filmmaking from behind the camera or acting would be at home. I grew up watching a lot of TV, a lot of talk shows, and so that seemed like a fun and easy platform to make videos with my cousins, my sister, my friends. And so we would do a lot of that, just set up the camera, have everybody in line, and I would be hosting. And as I'm hosting, I'm also directing them at like what to say. And so that to me was fun. And I didn't think about it as being a career option. Being from a small town in West Virginia and wanting to be on camera, it seemed like the options were news reporter or news anchor. And so vocational school, VOTech, that I went to, that was the place to do that. You get to be on camera, you get to learn how to use cameras, you get to edit, and you are making stories. It just wasn't in this creative way. But I hadn't thought much past that. I knew I wanted to do acting. I liked being in front of the camera. And so that's what then took me to Los Angeles. And there I did all the things that you do when you want to get into acting in LA. I waited tables a lot at a lot of places. I got my headshots done, luckily found an agent, and I went on a lot of auditions. And I mean, I'd heard the stories, right, that it's really hard to break into the industry, but I hadn't really thought about what the industry was or what that really meant. I knew I was having fun doing it. So I went on many, many auditions, and I got very little work, but the work I did get was fun. And I remember the first project that I got where I got to do like real acting was in a music video for the band Finch. I remember going into the audition and they asked me to be scared, right? And so they're like, okay, it's like you're sitting in a car and you look over and you see something that scares you. Like, how do you react? And so I did that. And then I got the call that I was cast in this music video. And the casting director is like, the reason you were cast is because you're the only person that didn't cover your face when we told you to be scared. And so whatever, it's fine, I took it. And I remember being on set for the first time and like in a trailer, and they like did my hair and my makeup. And then I'm standing there, and the first time the director says action, I had no clue what to do. No idea. I didn't know how any of it worked. But somehow I got through it, and it was a lot of fun. It really wasn't that kind of acting that I had dreamed of, or that, I pretended with my cousins in the living room. Like, it wasn't that kind of work that I was getting. But then what I did find, and I found mostly on Craigslist, because that's what we used back then. On Craigslist, a lot of students would put out ads for casting.
False clapping.
Rolling.
Oh, okay.
Marker. Action.
Billy, it's me, Susan. Remember this doll? The doll we used to play with in the attic? He's on this life support, and it's plugged in right here, so, okay.
So I remember going on Craigslist and, submitting my headshot and resume to, student directors. And to me, I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew here's a role, and there's actually a script, and I get lines, and I get to really play, because that's what acting, is. You're playing this part.
Rolling. Mark it. Action.
Hi, my name is Megan Wright, and I'm from Alabama. And I've been singing for a really long time. I started when I was really young, and I was at the mall and I won a karaoke contest, so I think I'm going to win American Idol.
All right, let's see what you got.
I'm going to be singing Etta James at last.
Cut.
After auditioning for a while, and again, getting to do what I thought I could be doing, I had a couple of friends that went to the local community college, and it was very cheap to go there. And so I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll go to community college. Maybe I'll do news again, start trying to get back into that, maybe be an anchor or reporter, just so I could be on camera. And part of the news program at this community college, you had to take film classes. And so that's where I really was introduced the first time to more independent cinema, and seeing different ways to tell stories, and then finding out that you could be behind the camera and completely construct those stories that people are going to watch. And so I became very interested in that aspect of it and started making short films about friends, like these portrait projects that we used to do in school. And then finding, ways to tell stories. I come from like being taught, write what you know. And so I really kind of dove into that, like write what you know. And I started making projects about growing up in West Virginia, some documentaries about that. Pretty much all of the work I did pointed back to West Virginia and being from this place. Before I really thought much about what that was, this was before I was interested in Appalachian studies. I just knew like my own experiences. This brings me to my favorite. While in film school at CalArts in California, I started working on a script about growing up in small town West Virginia.
Can I get this? You do not need another one of those. Please. Honey, I just don't have the money right now.
But it has a contest to meet Hanson in it.
Okay, get it.
Once I graduated from school with my undergrad in film, I knew that I wanted to move back to West Virginia to make that film, but also any story that I wanted to tell I knew took place here in West Virginia. And so that's what I did. Quickly realized how hard it would be to make a movie. I didn't have any resources. I didn't know anyone who was really working in film, at that time here. And so I just kept going to school. I went to West Virginia State University and then decided to just keep going to school. And so I applied to OU for my doctorate, and I'm still in the process of writing that dissertation. But it was there I really got more into Appalachian studies. And I knew I loved this place, but I didn't know about, some of the complexities. I'd had West Virginia history in 8th grade, as we all do in West Virginia.
For a little while up in Taylor County, and then cuddling up to Wheeling, where you get the Ohio part of it. It was a very, very big deal.
But I still had a lot to learn about this place. And so as I'm learning that and the history here, I'm also still working on that script. And they influence one another in my interest. And when I started this story, it's just like a story about a girl growing up in West Virginia. But then I started to learn about ways that maybe that was a different type of story that hadn't really been told in West Virginia. There are a lot of stories told here, but we have a lot of stories that haven't been told. And so I kind of made that the platform for the film. And it's highly based on my personal experiences.
Makes the world go round and round and round. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. I was just showering in my Hanson shirt like usual, because everyone knows I can't do anything with that one on.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Because we won't stay longer, 'cause I need... Oh my goodness!
You never go anywhere without a Hanson shirt.
You got that right. I love Hanson. I got a ring. Bye.
Hanson! I love Hanson! Woo! This is dumb.
Come on.
I had friends that came on board that, were willing to help out with making this project come to life. And somehow we pulled it all together and made the film. We shot the film in 2015 with a lot of local people, a lot of local cast, most of them from Meadowbridge, because that was important to me for the project, to get that feeling that I wanted it to have, that it was, made with the people in that space. And so it was interesting and I think that's one of the reasons that it is my favorite, is to have something that I'd worked on for so long and I'd written and people had read, but then to see it come to life, or to see the sets come to life and think about how will I make my teenage bedroom? How do you make it, restage that? One of the more interesting aspects of it, so, again, writing what I know, it's based on my childhood. I cast people to act as my mom, someone to act as my dad.
I understand that you and Jesse are having a talking problem in Mr. McClung's class.
No. Oh, yeah? Who told you that?
And, friends and cousins. And so then when, this thought that people are going to be sitting there and watching how you perceived, kind of their lives, it was an experience that I didn't think about when I started making the project, like others' experiences with the project, or just people in Meadow Bridge who, I'm representing their town, and did I do it justice? Like what are people's expectations for the project? And I think one of the most interesting parts was when the film screened, like my parents were no longer together, but there was something about them seeing this past life that they had when they were together, and life was different. And so their interactions with that experience was definitely something that I took away. The strength in filmmaking is you're replicating or representing an experience that you have, and it's from your perspective. You're choosing what you say, when you say it, how you say it, but how do others perceive that? And that's something that I learned a lot from that project. Future. I love being in the classroom and hands-on and working with students, and we're all making movies together. And then, of course, in March, as we all know, that was sort of taken away. As I'm teaching, I also have these other projects that I hope to make. And so I was working on a script for another feature narrative that I still hope to make at some point when that's possible again. But again, everything kind of stopped in March. And so it became an interesting time, as we all know, but also in being creative, how do you work through that? What am I doing? And luckily in this time, I was working in a script club with my friend Kern Sheldon, and we were still doing some Zoom or FaceTime, working through our scripts. He's working on a script, I'm working on this one. We read each other's stuff, give feedback. And somehow in that discussion, we're thinking, well, what's something that maybe we can make now? And that's where Quarantine Life came to be. Which, if you all haven't seen this shirt, from our friends Dan and Hillary at Kinship Goods, Quarantine Life. You can get these shirts. Can you believe that?
What?
In making that series, taking something small, like trying to chat with your friends while you social distance, and then expanding that into this comedic world. And then we put that online and people enjoyed it and they had a moment to laugh. And while we were, we knew not everyone had the same shared experiences, because there's, people are dealing with a lot. They are dealing with a lot. It's not all funny, of course. But I think our hope was to give some, some levity to the situation. And so when I think about my future, I think I really love being an educator. I love making films. I love acting in films. So if I'm able to do that in some aspect, in some way, and bring all of these passions together, I feel very lucky. And throughout, this chat with you, I didn't say a lot of names, but there are so many people that helped me to get where I am right now. The people that helped make Meadow Bridge, that gave feedback on projects. There are way too many to be able to name, but I do appreciate them, because without them, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I've had. And so I'm very thankful for that. And as I go, into the next projects, I'm working on a documentary that I've been following a family for over 2 years. So I hope to have that project wrapped up and out in the world, hopefully before too long. And then the next narrative feature, I hope to get that off the ground whenever this time of quarantine, and not really even quarantine now, it's, trying to navigate what normalcy is, once we're able to gather in groups and make projects. I really look forward to that. And this semester, back in the classroom a little bit, trying to figure out how to bring that energy and passion into a virtual classroom is something that I'm working on right now. But I hope to continue making projects. I would love to do more acting because it's something that started this love of, visual storytelling. And so I hope that I am, given more opportunities in that way. I tell my students to cast me in their projects, so maybe that's how I do this.
I had to become a master of disguise, moving amongst the trees as if I were the wind.
Thank you so much for listening to this little snippet of me and who I am and how I got here. And thank you, Jeff, so much for 3 Things and for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. So thank you, dining room. Okay.
Thank you, Tijah. That was great. We always love when we have filmmakers on the show. You guys can go check out Quarantine Life on Facebook. Next up, we have Mark Blackwell. He's a graphic artist, photographer, just a creative in general. He had been on my list for a while now to get on the show. 3 little facts about Mark that really made me want to get him on to do this for us. First, he did the logo for our home venue at the John L. Dickinson Family Homeowner Education and Community Center. And he also worked on the cover for previous guest Danny Boyd's graphic novel Salt. And third, and probably most impressive, was that Mark has played a Klingon on television. So please welcome Mark Wolfe Blackwell.
Hi there, I'm Mark Wolfe Blackwell. I am very much appreciative to Jeff Shirley and the sponsors of the 3 Things, and I'm very honored to be part of this amazing program. I've watched them from afar for about 5 years now. I have always enjoyed the people they've asked to be part of it, and now that I'm a part of it, I'm following some very big shoes, and I'm very pleased to be part of this. In a nutshell, we're supposed to talk about our origins and where we have been and where we're going. So I'll try to, I've done a lot, so I'll try to make this as enjoyable and succinct as possible. Let's start from the very beginning. I was born here in Charleston, West Virginia at McMillan Hospital, which is no longer around. And that was my beginning here in Charleston. But quickly thereafter, I was whisked away from the state to live on a couple of different Marine bases because my father was an active duty Marine. And my father and mother took me to live with them, and then my mother divorced my father and married another gentleman named Wolfe, which is where I get Wolfe from. I was adopted as Mark Wolfe. My original name was Mark Blackwell. I have a birth certificate and everything, Mark Blackwell. So when I was adopted, I became Mark Wolfe, and with a brand new birth certificate and an Indiana Social Security number, because I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. The experience in Indiana was the basis of my interests and my personality, I guess. I'm very Midwestern, and I have always thought of Indiana as home. and the interest in art and music was developed there. I have always had two loves, two passions, and that's music and art. And art seemed to have come much easier to me. It's much more liquid, for fluid or organic for me to be able to kind of produce, whereas music kind of work a little bit more to it. And I've always had a great awe and respect for musicians. So as far as artists go, same thing. I've grown up with some amazing artists who have become my idols. Jack Davis of Mad Magazine, Wally Wood, and Boris Vallejo, Frank Frazetta, later on Andy Warhol, and Saul Bass. Saul Bass probably took me into the graphic design realm. And then later on, Milton Glaser, who recently passed away. Milton Glaser was a very huge idol of mine in graphic design. So I've always known I was going to be a graphic designer. I knew I was going to be an artist. And I have been very fortunate throughout my life to use art and as a means of expression as well as employment. I guess my first professional gig as an artist was as the cartoonist for the Pendleton Middle School newsletter, which was kind of this mimeograph newsletter that we had when I was a student there, and I really loved that. Then my mother divorced Mr. Wolfe, came back to West Virginia where she was from and where she grew up, and she was raised in Charleston, and so this is where we landed. And I went to Stonewall High School. I'm trying to keep all the names, but Stonewall High School, that's what it was when I was there. So I had been very much immersed in art there as well. I had, I was able to win some awards, some art shows, and do some things there for the school. But the most important thing about that was that they had a program for people that were attuned to professional goals, but also had a grade level and an academic record to reflect that. So we only had to go half day for the junior and senior year of high school, which I was thrilled about, because like as a strange guy from Indiana who didn't really know anybody here, I didn't have really many friends here. So again, art was the thing I was just grasping onto. It was my friend, it was my ally, it was my release. But graphic design, that graphic design program had opened up at Benjamin Franklin Vocational School. So I did cartooning for the Ben Franklin newspaper, and I learned my skills on the board as a designer. Back when I was a graphic designer, everything was done by hand. When I first started graphic design, it was all hand. It was called board work. We had to cut the Rubylith by hand. We had to ink everything by hand. Things were lined out in a non-reproduction blue. It was a whole thing. It was a lot. And we had to photograph it and pull plates and then use wax machines and so I can stick things down, type and artwork and photography. It was a real deal. So it was my formative being a designer. And I was thrilled. I just loved all that hands-on stuff and the ritual of it. And that got me into West Virginia State College, which is now West Virginia State University. And that was a great deal of fun and education. I studied graphic design there, and I started the Graphic Design Resource Center. I helped start the People for MIC with Dr. Paul Newchums. I got very active in student teaching with Dr. Newchums, and I was able to kind of grow my experience as far as the skills of design as well as illustration there. And I was also the school cartoonist while I was there for the West Virginia State College Yellow Jacket. So I continued to create throughout my education, which went into my professional world, which in my first agency was Perry Productions. That was Carolyn Perry's production, advertising studio. She's now gone, sadly, passed away. So I was there for about 3 years. She decided to transition to another thing, so I went on to Charles Ryan Associates. They asked me to join them, so I was there for 3.5 years, and then did a lot of things there, learned a lot there, and I developed my skills there to the point where I left to go to Willard & Associates. Willard & Associates was another advertising agency that was rather large here at one time. And I became creative director there, where I did the Jaeger Airport logo and a lot of other fun stuff here in town, and a lot of national campaigns. I just loved it. But unfortunately, they closed their doors too. At this point, I had been to 3 different agencies, and I had, even in New York, when I spent some time in New York City, I worked for an agency, so I've been agencies out. And I said, I'm going to try it my own. Now, fortunately, at this point, computers were now, desktop publishing had come into being. This is 1994. And I had, I now had the ability to work at home. The cost was way down. You didn't have to do the wax machines and the Ruby Lith and the board work and have your own stat machine and your vector machine. You just had a desktop, like similar to what we have now, but much less memory and capability. But nonetheless, that's what started Mark Wolfe Design. Mark Wolfe Design was started over 26 years ago. So as Mark Wolfe Design, I've been an advertising, a graphic designer, and marketing person here in Charleston, and I have been able to enjoy a great number of collaborations with professionals here and creatives here. And so during my time as Mark Wolfe Design and being known as Mark Wolfe, I have always known that my father, whose name is James Blackwell, was living here in town. And on a chance meeting, I met my father, James Blackwell, and after a bit, we got together and we got reacquainted and we got to know each other very well. And when I got to know him, I realized this is why I am who I am. And you see, he studied art at Morris Harvey. He was an artist. He was also a musician at Stonewall Jackson High School in the band. My grandfather, Glenn Blackwell, was an entrepreneur, and he was also a piano player by ear, amateur, and I play guitar. So it all kind of came together, and it all seemed right. So I went from my adoptive name Wolfe to my original name Blackwell, which is who I am now legally and professionally now. I'm Mark Blackwell. So the meeting of my father, it bared many fruit, because I was able to understand who I was. I knew who my influences were. My grandfather, Glenn Blackwell, who I said was a musician, also was an entrepreneur. He had the Dog Wagon here in Charleston for many years, a very popular eatery in Charleston, as well as my grandfather, Blaine Pauley, on my mother's side, who was also an entrepreneur. He owned the South Charleston newsstand on D Street for many years until his death in 1981. The roots of genetics were very strong, and so have been the roots to here. So while I started my life in the Midwest, in Indianapolis and Indiana, and I had moved around a lot there, my time here, I have been able to develop artistically, creatively, meet my father, who now has moved to Florida now. He's in Florida, so I go see him at least a couple times a year. It's reacquainted with an entire family of mine. I have 2 wonderful aunts. My Aunt Anita, who is a professional musician and could also speak fluent German. I speak very bad German, but there you go, genetics. My Aunt Rita, and then I have a half-sister, Allison, who lives in Florida, and my brother, Glenn Blackwell, who still lives here for now. So I have a great deal of substance here to draw from, as far as, inspiration, as far as how I got started. And I've been blessed with being able to collaborate with many creative and talented people here in Charleston. I've been mentored by some of the best. One of my great art mentors, Robin Hammer, who recently passed away this year. He was a monstrous force to get me to start displaying my artwork and creating art more. And so I did, and I did for FestivALL. I've been a FestivALL artist for 3 times, I think. I've done FestivALL Fish. I have been instrumental in various committees and activities. I helped start East End Main Street's Hollow East. I created Art Mares, which is the artist portion of that. I created Streetworks, where artists come together and they show their art, and signs and etc. So I was able to be a big part of that, which I'm very proud of. And music. I was able to do something here that I have never thought I would be able to do, and that's through my good friend Chuck Beal, who produced my album Rubaiyat, which I played. I wrote all the music and played guitar on, and then he did percussive backup on that, and did a beautiful job producing it. And so we did that together, and so I was able to create music now and be able to sell that. And since then, I've been able to play with a number of great people. I've been able to travel to Wales and in London to play with some good friends and some very amazing players there. And I have been very fortunate to display my art overseas. And that's, again, through me living here and connecting through people here, and being able to dig into my creative roots, music and art, bring them together, and be able to find myself through that, and again, literally find my identity through a chance meeting with my father here in Charleston. So through my experiences of working with people as an entrepreneur, and as helping market people through design, illustration, photography, I became a tamarack artisan and started selling my photography professionally through calendars and prints, and I thought, well, what else can I do? I mean, I've done marketing, I've done design, I've done art, illustration. What else can I do to kind of outreach and grow? And naturally, real estate. So I got into real estate recently, and so for 2 years now I've been a licensed real estate agent. I'm currently with Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Central here in Charleston, and I have been able, through my photography and my marketing experience, help people get first homes, pieces of land. I was very honored to be able to help the Dobbs brothers sell the Fret and Fiddle building in St. Albans. That had always been a refuge of mine musically for many, many years. And so again, to be a real estate agent and to help them get through the process of listing and selling their building, it was immensely rewarding to me on a professional and on a personal level. Scott and Dale were super through the whole process, and I loved Joe Dobbs, and so I was able to kind of help his sons transition away from that. And fortunately, Fret and Fiddle is in existence today, still in St. Albans, under due ownership, but it's still a music shop. The future for me is probably going to be here in West Virginia for a while longer. I'm still going to continue to create through music, through art, through illustration, through design, through photography. But I'm also going to continue to give myself, where needed and when needed, to various organizations and committees and groups to help this town in whatever way I can. I'm also going to continue real estate. I'm going to continue to help the wonderful people that I've been able to help and work with in that profession. Again, utilizing advertising and marketing and photography and all of that, because as a core, that's really who I am. I'm a creator. I'm an artist, and I am a person who thrives on development and growing, and I'm hoping that through the various tools I've been given and the assistance I've been given, I'll be able to be an asset for many years to come. So my future will hopefully be of service, and my future will always contain art and music and the love of where my roots are. So that, in a nutshell, in about 20 minutes, is my life. And I thank you very much for watching it, and hopefully it edifies you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We're glad you came back to West Virginia when you did. Next up and last this evening, we have Reverend Matthew J. Watts, and he has been the pastor at Grace Bible Church for 37 years. And after talking to Reverend Watts over the last month or so while we've been working on this, it was easy to find out why he is one of the most respected community leaders in Charleston. He's not afraid to speak his mind and point out injustice when it's occurring. He just seems like he was born for his position as a pastor, and we're just very excited to have him on the show for all the things that he's done for our local community. We like to highlight those kinds of people. So up now is Reverend Matthew J. Watts to tell us about his first, favorite, and future.
Thanks, Jeff, for those kind words of introduction. Again, my name is Reverend Matthew J. Watts, Senior Pastor of the Grace Bible Church in Charleston, West Virginia, where I've pastored for the past 26 years. I'm a son of Grace, so I've been associated with Grace Bible Church for 36 years, and pastored 2 smaller churches before that. And I'm a native of McDonald Hill in Mount Hope, West Virginia. So I want to share a little bit about my career as a pastor and as a minister. I actually started out as a civil engineer, and I worked as a civil engineer for over 20 years with the United States Tennessee Valley Authority and with Union Carbide. And since the call into the ministry about 36 years ago. And my call in the ministry was somewhat interesting. I actually started to preach even before I was officially licensed to the ministry. I had such a zeal for the Word of God and a desire to share the good news of the gospel of the kingdom. So a good friend of mine, Ron Sherrod, and I, we decided we would go out into the hedges and the highways, and we would compel people to come into God's kingdom. We took seriously the mandate of Jesus of Nazareth, that we should seek to save that which was lost, particularly the least, the last, the lost, the left out, the left behind, the marginalized, and the excluded. I'd read a couple of books that a mentor had given to me, Mr. Reverend Larry Smith, about the ministry of John M. Perkins in Mississippi. And Perkins emphasized the importance of trying to reach the poor. So Ron Sherrod owns the Orchard Manor. He said, I believe the poorest people in all of the Charleston area are those people in Orchard Manor, so we should try to reach them. So we purchased a 16 millimeter projector from a church that had an old desk projector in its basement, got a screen, got a friend of ours, John Mitchell. We had a truck, we loaded up full of chairs and got a couple of coolers and filled them up full of popsicles and treats. So we go and knocking on the doors in Orchard Manor, compelling the parents to bring their children to watch a Christian film. We would borrow some electricity from a neighbor so we could fire up our 16 millimeter projector. And so that launched sort of our ministry. Many people accused us of bootlegging the gospel because we were not officially licensed to preach. But we did have a letter in the support of our pastor, Pastor Franklin Murphy. So we felt that we were credentialed and we were working under the auspices of the church that we were attending at the time. So we went into Orchard Manor, into Washington Manor, into Little Page, and Roseburg Circle, Dutch Hollow. We even launched a ministry to go into the southern West Virginia coal fields, my little hometown of Mount Hope, West Virginia, his hometown down in Greenbrier County in Leslie. We also hit Beckley in a few of the spots. We were determined that we were going to preach the good news of the gospel of the kingdom. We were going to evangelize the state of West Virginia. Well, there were some problems with the church that we were attending, so we felt like we should probably leave there. And so then we decided to launch a church. And so this was really an interesting endeavor and undertaking. So I went to the Bible bookstore and bought some Baptist hymnals and got some Sparrow notebooks and some loose leaf paper. I got my secretary to sort of make up me a flyer and a bulletin. We rented the 2nd Avenue Community Center on the west side of Charleston. And so we started having church services there. I would get up every Sunday morning. I would load my song books and my Bible and my Sparrow notebook and some other essential materials. I'd head to 2nd Avenue Community Center. I'd set the books out, pass out the flyers, and then I would turn the cardboard box upside down. And I would preach off of the side the cardboard box. I would preach my heart out, trying to win souls for the kingdom of God. And so from there, we went to Dunbar. A little storefront became available. It had been a poodle shop where a gentleman and his wife were grooming poodles. And we scrubbed and we disinfected and we sprayed Lysol. We never could totally get the poodle scent out of the store. We bought some folding chairs, and my wife had bought me a file cabinet, which I sit on top of a table, and I could carry my books in the portable file cabinet. I preached off the top of that file cabinet. And so that was sort of how we began to try to advance this ministry. From there, we were able to run a church on Roxlano Road, and we really thought we'd hit the big time then. We were going to start this church. It was going to grow to be a super church. Well, we did this for about 3.5 years, and my job assignments changed. I was traveling quite a bit, and so we felt led that maybe we should discontinue that endeavor. I'd encouraged the people that were with me to consider going to the Grace Bible Church on the west side of east end of Charleston at the time. They're licensed and ordained me to the ministry, and I thought it'd be a good place for them to go. And we were sort of all settled in there. I interrupted the Grace Bible Church for a while, and they passed on calling me to be their pastor at the time. They thought I was a bit too radical, a bit too militant, and too straightforward in my call for social justice and fairness and equity and civil rights now. Because I still believed, I believe that then, I believe it now, that the Bible is calls us as preachers to be prophets and to speak truth to power, and to say to powerful people, they must treat the least, the last, the lost, the left out, the left behind, the marginalized, and excluded fairly. So they passed on me, and that sort of entered or ended the first act or the first phase of my ministry. After that, I was there for a couple of months after they called a pastor, and this would have been in 1987. We did the little church plant thing from 84 to 87. And then a friend of mine called me from Madison, and he had started a church down there, and he and his wife were going to return back to New Jersey. And so they asked me if I would come down and help the people. I'd made a vow to the Lord I would go anywhere that an automobile would get me there. If people need someone to come and preach, I'll go and preach the good news of the gospel of the kingdom of God. So I went down the Sunday after Thanksgiving. I got out of my car and I stepped onto the lot, and it had been raining, it had been snowing, and now it was very, very wet. And the country mud, it sort of rolls up above my loafer to the bottom of my pants leg. And I said to myself, what have I gotten myself into? But I remember my vow that I made to the Lord. I said, I'm going to be true to this calling. So I went in. They had turned a 14 by 28 feet trail, a 14 feet by 28 feet trail. It knocked all the walls out, made the sanctuary. They had about 8 or 10 people. We had the great spirit, and they were excited about me being there. And I preached, and after the sermon, they had me for dinner, and then they asked me if I would consider staying and being with them for a while. I said, well, I'll give you guys about 4 months. I can get you to the spring, and then you can call someone to be your pastor. So it started off as a 3 to 4 month assignment, was extended to 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months, ended up a 3.5 year assignment. But it was a wonderful assignment. The people were so loving and kind and generous, and often referred to Madison as the place that time had forgotten. People were so different from the people in Charleston there. And so we were there in Madison for 6.5 years. And it was probably as exciting a time in my ministry as I've had in the 36 years I've been in ministry. I learned to preach, driving to Madison, being encouraged by the people there, being supported by their kindness, And it was a wonderful 6.5 years. But after that 6.5 year stint was up, I was called back to Charleston to pastor the mother church, my home church, the Grace Bible Church. And so in the fall of 1994, my wife and I, my children, we returned back to pastor the Grace Bible Church. And so for the last 26 years, I've been the senior pastor and the teacher of the Grace Bible Church. And it's been a wonderful journey, an exciting journey. The people at Grace Bible Church have been incredibly kind and generous to me and supportive. There have been times they have not always agreed with me, but they've always supported me, even when they disagreed. And even when I was going one of those wild tyrants, when I would someone put on my prophetic mantle and I must speak truth to power. Even if I'd written maybe a couple of pretty pointed op-ed pieces for the newspaper, they would still smile and support me and encourage me. And more than anything else, they prayed earnestly for me, and I really appreciate that. And so this will be the final act for my ministry. We plan on sort of ending up here at the Grace Bible Church. If someone would have told me that it would have been as challenging pastoring in Charleston as it's been, that I would become known as one of the more controversial and outspoken ministers, it really surprised me because I think I'm a pretty nice guy. And the people that know me sort of agree with me. It's amazing how you end up with a personal persona that you're not intended to have and that you're not always received in the way you intend to be received, and people come to their own conclusions. So if I'd known, I probably would not have started out on this journey, but I'm grateful to the Lord for his sustaining grace. I appreciate my wife of 40 years who's been very supportive of me, Pamela, and my 5 adult children and 11 grandchildren. I think they made the greatest sacrifice. They've had to listen to all of my critics and people that could not maybe wound me, the thing they would say that they do with my wife, my children, my grandchildren would hear, and it's caused them unnecessary pain. But I hold no hard feeling, I hold no grudge. I'm a follower of Jesus of Nazareth, and I believe in the end, God will vindicate his truth, tell us, and we may not see it or hear it, but in the end, God has the last word. So for my epilogue, I really want to spend more time with my wife, more time with my adult children, and more time with my 11 grandchildren. They believe I'm pretty special. They think I'm pretty smart. They think I'm funny, and they love to be around me, and they bring great joy to my heart. So I want to try to really inspire them as much as I possibly can. And most of my sermons are videotaped and audio taped. And I pray that maybe one of them or maybe more of them will say, what did our grandfather do with his life? And they'll go back and they'll listen to some of the sermons and some of the speeches. They'll read some of the things that I wrote, and they will maybe conclude that he had a clear vision of what he thought God wanted him to do. And it was to preach the good news of the gospel of the kingdom of God, give people an opportunity to hear about Jesus Christ, but also to try to demonstrate it with his commitment to service and sacrifice and trying to stand up for those who didn't have a voice. So that's why in these last few months, I've been talking about the Hope 2020 Economic Justice and Equity Fund, and why we believe that the government and the legislature should agree to set aside 20% of the $1.25 billion in CARE Act funds, set that money aside to address poverty and other social determinants of health across the 220 census tracts in our state that have poverty rates of 20% or higher. We believe that the distressed places and the people that live there, they deserve to be invested in. Their community should be invested in. And I believe if we lift those at the bottom, that they would raise West Virginia's economic, social, and cultural ship. I believe in people. I believe in them very profoundly. And I believe we invest in people, then they'll rise to the challenge and they'll solve the problems that our state has. So that's my story in 3 acts. From humble beginnings, preached on the top of a cardboard box, to being down in the country in South Madison, preaching to those wonderful people, to coming back to the capital city at a prized pulpit, the Grace Bible Church pulpit. I've had a great 36 years. Appreciate the Lord for it. Thank God for my family. And I hope maybe that someone has gained some insight of the ministry of the Reverend Matthew J. Watts. I'm out of my time. I thank you for yours.
Thank you, Reverend Watts. It's really easy to see after that how you became such a respected member of the Charleston community. I'd like to thank all of my guests tonight, Tijah, Mark, and Reverend Matthew Watts, for a wonderful episode. We're really enjoying doing these things virtually, and we're going to try to continue to do so. So please keep your eyes out on our social media pages for the September episode that we'll be announcing very soon. I'd like to thank my sponsors. I'd like to thank Maria Mallory at FestivALL for really helping making the show happen and continue right now. So thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.
1, 2, 3, 4. When I was young, I had a lot to say. So I learned how to sing, I learned how to play. You said you were mine when you heard my song. After all these years, you still sing along. The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things will